Hello, and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast where I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the DMsGuild and tabletop RPG space. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Amber Litke. Hello.
Hello.
How are we doing this evening? I suppose
This is 6 p.m. at night. Midnight for you, as I recall.
only by technicality. But what was it? I think I spent last week kind of complaining about how the times have changed, like the UK clock system. Like we've had daylight savings, and it's for me, my body hasn't adjusted quite enough yet. So
daylight savings was 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. I still haven't adjusted.
Yeah. I think it's a case of I'm fortunate in the fact that 90% of my technology automatically adjusts. It's things like just my oven, and I've never really run my life by my oven clock.
No, but it does trip me up every time the microwave isn't correct, and then you try and fix the microwave, and it doesn't have an intuitive clock system, so you end up breaking it. So for a straight week until you find the manual or search it online, it's just displaying some random time, 3 in the morning.
It's always the case of is it worth the struggle? Are there enough times where I look at my microwave clock and go, is it 3 a.m. right now? Well, complaints about clocks aside, for the people listening, if they haven't necessarily heard about you and this kind of stuff that you, what sort of things are you known for?
So as far as I'm aware, what I'm known for is adventures mostly. I wrote, my very first adventure was The Fog of Soulhaven back during the December 2019 RPG Writers Workshop, which does not feel like it was a year and 4 months ago. Yeah. That felt like yesterday. I wrote The Deathless Skies of Sire alongside Sadie Lowry, and I was part of the anthology Eyes Unclouded. I also do creature design 3 times a week, or try to do it 3 times a week if I have the spell slots, with my Monday, Wednesday, Friday monsters. And a lot of people also know me as having a calculator brain because I like math.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So I think we're going to tackle a lot of really good points. We're going to almost tackle them chronology. Okay, I can't say that word.
Chronologically.
There we go. That's the word I'm going for. I don't know what it is. My brain. I have words that I will get caught in a loop where I just. So starting with the RPG Writers Workshop, I guess. Well, I guess what kind of made you want to start? What kind of was the?
So yeah, my best friend Sadie comes to me one day and is like, "Here's this writing workshop. We'd recently gotten into playing 5e. We started a campaign 4 months before that, and she was like, "Hey, here's this workshop course on writing adventures for 5e. It costs $20 for the path with personalized lessons and stuff." I don't remember the details anymore. It's been a while. Forgive my memory, audience. And it was like, "Do you want to do it with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I got nothing better to do." And that's the humble story of how we began.
Just kind of dragged in by a friend. Maybe not dragged in, but
not entirely dragged in. But she was like, "Hey, do you want to do it? It sounds cool." And I was like, "It does sound cool."
So I guess so the kind of Fog of Soulhaven is kind of was the kind of the idea of that adventure, was it kind of did it come to you quite quickly, or was it kind of through
I had a couple of ideas for the RPG Writers Workshop, and it took me a while because the first 2 weeks were "Hey, concept your adventure plan," and I had all of these ideas. I did not know what I wanted to do, and so one day I sat down with a journal I had bought specifically to do my planning in, because I was like, "I'm going to do this the best possible way I can." Fresh journal, handwritten notes, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. And then I was like, "You know what? I'm just going to do a gothic horror adventure." And I was like, "That's it.
I've Page one bullet point note. Well, I guess I'm done now. I can go.
Yep, I'm done." That was the sole idea that drove it. Was I want to write a gothic horror adventure, and then at that point I got so stuck. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
So I guess what was exactly I guess what was the story that you wanted to tell with gothic horror then, or what did you feel was it just a space you didn't think was explored enough with 5e?
I don't think so. I think at the time I was just like, this is the easiest thing that I think I can write in the span of a month and a half.
Yeah.
And if I try to do anything else, I'm going to like fry my own brain.
That's fair.
So, but it is a genre that I like theoretically. I can't participate in a lot of it as it's presented in media, if only because I'm easily squeamish. But tabletop RPG gives a really good venue for interacting with like horror because it's not a visual medium, and so I engage better with horror when it's not visual. So I kind of wanted to write an adventure that I would like to participate in.
Actually, I always found that like a double-edged sword, because I always tell the story from my mum, who she used to be scared of reading horror books, more so than watching horror films, because no matter what a horror film kind of could show, she felt like my mind knows what I'm scared of, and it comes up with the worst visualization. So I guess it was kind of playing around with that, and then I guess so once you kind of had the story, was you kind of mentioned yourself, you kind of quite mathematical, maybe like mechanically minded. Was this kind of the I guess the gateway drug? I don't know what's it called.
I don't know where you're going with that one.
Was this like, wow, I can do some maths in here? I don't know.
Oh yeah. I guess fun fact. I technically have a college degree in game design, which up until that point had gone unused. Ended up working in a call center straight out of college. So the RPG Writers Workshop was basically the first time I had a pseudo-professional at the time, basically a way to actually use the degree and all of the skills I had learned in a way that like made sense and would be good to do. So I was like, I'm gonna gamify this whole thing. So for me, it was a fun way to basically tackle like how do I think that a 5e adventure would be fun to play through, like coming from background of video game design. I do have to say, would not recommend writing a 5e adventure with only the player's handbook and no experience with 5e adventure design. I made a whole lot of mistakes. It was trial by fire.
So I guess to kind of like to latch onto that a little bit then. So what would you say like was some of the, I guess, game design? I guess like there's a whole bunch of books about like, you know, the natures of game design and stuff like that. Were there any sort of like particular elements that you kind of wanted to bring in?
Let me see. There is, I don't know the curve, the all of these terms have gone straight out my brain all of a sudden. There's that really fancy one that one of my narrative professors really hated. He was like, I hate when this term gets used. It sounds way too fancy, but ludonarrative dissonance. He hated that term. He was like, he was my game narrative professor, and he was like, I don't want to hear this. We're only discussing it because I'm required to. But basically the idea of wanting to merge the narrative of my adventure narrative with the mechanics that would actually come into play during the adventure. The idea that those things should be seamless, that your mechanics should propel the story, and your story should be fed into by the mechanics, so that when you decide to roll the dice, you don't feel like it's just a game.
It's kind of keeping the players within that moment, and it's there's never really that moment of like, okay, well, this is just rolling dice.
I'm just rolling dice for the sake of rolling dice.
No, it's true. Well, funny enough, the lesser counterpart to that is that's not really spoken about too much is ludonarrative harmony. which everyone kind of focuses on like the disconnect of when the two things. Full disclosure, I also have a game design degree. So we're in the same boat together. And I think bare bones, I think 5e does like a semi decent job, but I think there are I suppose when it comes to like adventures, that's when it's kind of amped up a little bit, because you're going for like particular themes. You want, again, you wanted to kind of evoke the sort of like gothic horror side of things. I'm curious then. So what was your angle to try and scare people, or like, give that sort of like spooky vibe?
after going through tons of bullet points with like, going from that sole bullet point on the journal and then being like, all right, this is it. I had to go back and be like, okay, what am I actually writing though now? Because I can't just go off of that. I ended up taking a lot of inspiration from Bloodborne originally, in the idea of like sort of a very gothic horror-y town where the people become monsters after a period of time. And the way I conveyed that in Fog of Soulhaven was basically the kind of a claustrophobia type of thing. There was a fog that rolled over the city, and if you spent too much time in the fog, you became an aberration.
Ooh.
And so the idea was kind of this like claustrophobic horror where like the fog is narrowing what parts of the city are currently inhabitable. You have people having to retreat, lose possessions, lose people, and like basically struggle to survive. I'm not sure how well I did conveying that mechanically at the time, fresh-faced 5e adventure writer and all, but that had been the intent. There was like a roll table of fog effects, so if you spent too long in the fog, you'd see things or you'd hear things, and it would encourage you to go deeper in.
No, I was going to say, it is like a clever way to get around the sort of like open-endedness of some adventures, to kind of have that gentle nudging in the right, again, not quite railroading, but again, it's a case of like, players by means, they can spend the entire evening of the fog if they want. It just won't be a good time.
It will not be a good time. You're encouraged to go from point A to point B as fast as humanly possible.
But no, so that was interesting. And then I suppose I guess the kind of the dipping into the RPG writer workshop then was an overall positive experience.
It was. It definitely was. I came out of it and I was like, I want to do this better. I want to do this again, but I want to do it right this time.
So was that then kind of straight from there the leapfrog into the Deathless Skies of?
Yeah, we went from RPG Writers Workshop ending about like, I think it was December 14th is when all of the adventures got published.
Yeah.
Basically took 2-week break for Christmas time and started fresh January 1st, 2020 of time to write a new one. Yeah. And we spent the next 2 months until February 29th writing until we finished DSOC. And overall, the reception to that one was really positive, really good, and I think we did a significantly better job combined writing DSOC than I feel like I did a significantly better job in DSOC than I did in Fog of Soulhaven.
I guess was the kind of like design process different, it going from like obviously an individual project to like a group project, I suppose?
I don't particularly think so. I only say that because I work extremely well with Sadie. We basically support each other's weaknesses. We've been writing together for years before this, so it was effectively second nature to switch the process to basically being collaborative for us. I don't know how it would be if I was working with someone in like writing an adventure that I wasn't historically writing with before. So that's not something I can speak to, but it was very easy for us to just seamlessly merge our processes.
And then I guess kind of, so between the first two adventures and stuff like that, did you kind of go away and look at like any sort of, I suppose, like hardcover adventure books or anything like that to kind of take inspiration from, or did you kind of?
Definitely. I acquired the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Handbook in that period of time. So that was significantly useful because I had all of the rules now.
Yeah, I imagine operating with like 1/3 of the system.
It isn't good. I had access to more people's adventures because I had more exposure to DMsGuild. I didn't have any hard copy adventures at the time. I actually still don't, but I do have access to them on D&D Beyond, so that's easy enough. But having the access to the DMsGuild and knowing that I could go buy someone else's adventure to look at, like, the works of MT Black or anyone else and just be like, hey, here's a good reference material, was made for absolutely better design overall, because those were just resources I knew about because they were encouraged in the workshop, but I was suspicious of.
Yeah, no, I'm still exactly the same. Like I always have like in my ongoing like to-do list, there is always a case of like, oh, you should buy X adventure and just kind of study it and it's like it feels like I'm giving myself homework.
Exactly. I was like when I was doing the RPG writers workshops, like, no, I can do this by myself. This is fine. I got this.
And yeah, I guess it is a case of like, yeah, just to like the reading just other people. It's creative fuel in a way. It's kind of like seeing what other people have done before. And some not stealing, but sometimes people do really cool ideas that you just like, I should borrow that. That seems like a really good layout.
Scrape.
Yeah, it's like this is a really nice container for information. I'm going to take your words out and just put my words in, and then it's
fine. Fine.
So then I guess, so where exactly in your journey did the Monday, Wednesday, Friday monsters kind of find its way in?
So I acquired the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, and I had decided that the RPG Writers Workshop encouraged that if you couldn't find monsters to suit your adventure, to try and make your own. And I had looked through some free resources trying to find monsters that from like the Monster Manual that I thought fit, and I couldn't find any. I was like, nowadays I could pick out half a dozen that would work. I would just have to reskin them in narrative, but I didn't have that. I didn't have that context.
It feels almost like, was it like it's a power up? Like you hit that point of like every monster can be any monster.
Yeah, you level up and you're like, wait, I just have to say it uses the stats of this.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make my own creatures because at the time I didn't know you could do that. So I tried to cobble together a bunch of like aberrations out of like ghouls and cats and what have you. My final boss in Fog of Soulhaven is a giant like eldritch mouth in the floor of the cathedral, and in hindsight I did not do that stat block correct at all. That is a gargantuan creature with D8s for hit dice.
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah, I could kick myself thinking about that. But anyway, I came off of the Fog of Soulhaven and was like, I want to learn how to make creatures. I want to learn how to do this correctly. So I popped open the DMG and I popped open the Monster Manual and I was like, I'm going to study this. And I was like, I am going to make a monster a day until I can make stat blocks perfectly.
And what number are we on to up today?
Well, at first I started doing them every day, and I was like, I'm going to do one every single day, and that lasted 2 months before I realized this was exhausting. I could not keep up this momentum. I was running out of ideas. I was getting very tired. I was basically having to, like, at the end of the day, I would realize at 11 p.m., oh crap, I haven't made a monster yet. Time to whip out something in like an hour that I can post. So I ended up swapping after the 60 days to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday format, which works a whole lot better, except sometimes I still miss days because we're in a pandemic and I'm very tired.
I mean, that's another thing as well. It's like, this is like a self-imposed challenge and stuff like that. No one's going to be like, I need this monster right now. I can't, my week is going to, and sometimes it's a case of like, you kind of hold yourself because the reason why I kind of asked so much about it is I do the same kind of thing with Random Encounter Monday. Mm-hmm. Where again, I don't have the same stamina. I can't do it 3 times. But every Monday I post like a random encounter, and I've what I found is like exercises like that it's such a good design exercise.
It is.
It's that sort of like, you know, the only way you get better at something is just by doing it often, and it's kind of an excuse to kind of write, I guess, you know, something contain and finish. It's like, hey, I've done this thing.
It's fun because it's just something that you're like, if you're not so attached to it that you're like, I need to put this in a supplement for money, it's just a free resource for other people. And I think that's something I really enjoy doing. For them numerically, the Monday, Wednesday, I cannot speak this hashtag ever. The Monday, Wednesday, Friday monsters is up to day 106. So if you tack on the 60 days from monster a day, that I'm at to 166 days of creatures.
That's not bad. It's what is it? That's quick. No, not quite a year yet. It's like 200 days short, but it's getting there.
It's getting close. At some point.
So then I guess I kind of have to ask this. So I guess what is your process then for creating a monster?
So the basic idea comes from like one of 3 places. which is either I realize I haven't done anything today, and so I come up with the first thing that comes to my brain, regardless of how smart or useful or necessary or needed it is. Two, I'll base it off of something that I'm inspired by while I'm playing another game. I am a huge MMO geek, and I try to keep up playing both World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV.
That's like 2 jobs at once.
It really is. Add in the third actual job and the TTRPG. This is why I have no spell slots. I'm doing it to myself. But so if I come across a creature or a monster or a boss in one of the games, and I'm like, it would be interesting to see how this would be as like a D&D creature, I'll, try my hand at it. And then the third way is that someone in my like home table group makes a really stupid joke, and I'm like, all right, this is becoming a stat block now.
This is now becoming a reality. You've willed this into existence.
Yep, you have done this. You have done this to yourself, and I am bringing it into creation now.
So then I guess is do you find it, because I must admit, like, I guess my very crude approach to monster design is a lot like Frankenstein's monster, in the case I take features from multiple creatures and I just kind of like slot them into one place, or is there like a particular, like, because I know I know that like is it Matt Coville has like a design of like each monster should have just like one action, and it should be a very exciting action, because most monsters in D&D may only be around for one turn, so they kind of need to get in and do that kind of spicy thing first. I'm just kind of curious about it, like
it depends on the day. Sometimes I'll be like, and now we're just gonna mash every single thing together. We're gonna take that celestial and that fiend, and that this is just how it goes now. You have produced some abomination of a fusion dance.
Yeah.
And then other days I'm like, I want to do something creative. I had as an example, I had an idea. I wanted to create a boss monster that was based off of reactions. So I made a pirate captain that was basically had legendary reactions instead of legendary actions, and basically they could take a legendary, like three reactions per round based off of a list of reactions to different triggering effects, and that would be kind of how they got more actions in per round in a different way than legendary actions allow a creature to. Yeah. And so a lot of those were unique. They didn't have a basis outside of maybe some like oddly specific wording I could take from a different ability. Yeah. And so that was all pretty much fresh stuff.
Dude, that is a really interesting way to kind of mess around with the kind of, I suppose, the action economy and keeping kind of players on their toes, because I guess they would start looking out for those triggers to be like, well, we can't do this now because we're going to get bopped.
Exactly.
So then I guess, so you mentioned the angel devil combination. You mentioned like, would you say like you kind of lean towards like the higher end stat blocks, do you think? Or
so usually I try to make blocks, unless I'm feeling particularly daring. My blocks tend to either be from like CR0 to usually like 8, 10-ish, mostly just because if these are going to be free for use, I want them to be usable by most people who would chance upon them, and a lot of people never end up in high tier play, which is one of the detriments.
Yeah,
I think to D&D is that there's like so much of the game that people just don't access because it takes so long to get there, or it's too hard to play in that particular later tiers.
So was it? I think I've played a one shot once with like a tier 20 character. Oh, sorry. Level 20, and it scared me. I didn't like. It's there's too much going on. Like at that range and stuff. I feel like you kind of need to be playing a character from 1 to 20 to at least understand, rather than just have like all the toys thrown at you at once.
Yeah, like unless you've played a character that high before and you kind of know what you're dealing with, I can't imagine being shoved into playing like a level 20 druid. What would I even do with myself?
Now, if I was a barbarian or like a fighter, easy. just whack 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 whack. You have like a flaming sword, and you know what you're doing. But I was a wizard, and it kind of threw me for a loop. But that's what I mean. It's also the case of some of the things that I'm not cautious about, but I'm always aware of is the fact that when it comes to like monster or when it comes to encounter design, it doesn't really exist in balancing doesn't really exist because you don't know what you're up against. It's the case of like, you could throw okay, this is a really interesting like anti-mage anti-mage lizard. As just an example off the top of my head, you can see that this is why I'm not creating stat blocks every.
I think it sounds cool. I want one.
But you throw that at like a group of the 5 barbarians, they're gonna be like, oh no, our spells. What are we gonna do?
Wait, we have those? You have spells?
I cast mad.
Oh yeah. No, that's the thing too. I'm also of the personal opinion that because people never usually get into those upper tiers of play, that certain creature types should be more readily accessible for like lower tiers. Like I want to make more CR 1 through 5 celestials so that people who never reach, I don't know, seeing a Deva or a Planetar or whatever get the chance to experience, interacting with, angelic foes or angelic allies. Because I don't think that it's fair that people will never get to I don't know, fight an angel because they're never going to be level 15.
And there's got to be little angels out there, the little
baby
messengers,
angels.
The baby angels. I suppose, what was it? Does that make imps like baby devils? Is that the kind of?
I don't know how I feel about that one.
Because you do kill a lot of imps. Like players are fighting a lot of imps, and maybe they're just baby devils.
Maybe they are. Oh no.
I do want to ask. So this is more of a pet peeve than anything else. But I think damage vulnerabilities are incredibly underutilized.
They definitely are. I always run the. You kind of always create, I guess you were saying this earlier, like you don't know what you're ever going to be facing, so encounter design is really difficult to balance. I think the same way with creatures. So you always run this like risk of you're designing kind of in a vacuum. So it's like I can make a skeleton with vulnerability to bludgeoning damage, and I always find it difficult to pick damage vulnerabilities because I'm like, I want this to be a challenge no matter who faces up against it. And if you have a party full of mace-wielding barbarians and clerics,
like the
skeleton's gonna just die. And I think that's something I need to personally get over because there's been a lot of I've seen the topic crop up a lot where like DMs shouldn't necessarily take away or prevent characters or players from using their fun toys because you got those toys for a reason and you should be able to feel cool using them. So why not let your cleric and mace wielding barbarians tear through a horde of bludgeoning damage vulnerable skeletons?
Yeah.
So I do think damage vulnerability is definitely underutilized, and I underutilize it. So good thing to keep in mind.
As I say, yeah, because I was funnily enough, I've in the past I'm working on a project which is essentially a way of adding more unique damage vulnerabilities to creatures. So rather than in the traditional sort of like double damage, it's more of like targeting a beholder's eye, for example, and that being like a sort of more targeted vulnerability, and having things like hitting a guy in armor with lightning damage, obviously wearing all the metal things like that. And one of the things that so I was working with Kai Linder. He did a search of like every creature for kind of like their vulnerabilities of that, and it's a case of like it's so underused. There's like 13, or like there's hardly any, and even when there's you would think there would at least be one creature that is vulnerable to every damage type. No, it just doesn't exist, and we were thinking of like cool head stuff because like everyone's like, oh, so I hit the devil, or like I hit the fiend with like radiant damage that does double, right? Because in everyone's head, it's like this should be doing double. It should be like this is and it just never does. It's like no, they don't. They
Makes
don't
sense,
care.
wouldn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, sorry. Thank you for indulging me in that little rant.
No, I totally get it. Like, I think double damage, like your idea of having more specific vulnerabilities that like interact more interestingly is actually one of the things that I would love to see more of in a way, because double damage just chunks through HP faster, which I don't think lends fights to being more creative. And I think that's, if you'll let me go on a tangent here for a second.
I did mine. This your turn now.
That's one of the things that I find is most necessary when designing creatures is the idea of creatively interacting with them, or how they creatively interact with characters, character abilities, and the environment around them. Because things that DMs can always do, and whether you have an opinion on like fudging rolls or fudging numbers or not, you can always inflate health easily, and you can always inflate damage easily. It takes 0 effort for a DM to double the HP pool of a creature that they're working with, or to add like an extra damage die on to what they're rolling for a creature's HP. So numerically tweaking like HP and AC and damage numbers to be like perfectly balanced almost is pointless, because a DM can adjust those super easily for their table's difficulty level. I mean, it's helpful to have a base guideline, of course. It's not to say that you shouldn't try for balance, but that's something that can be easily adjusted. The actual skills and how they interact on the battlefield is much less easily improved on the fly by a DM who wants to add more challenge. So I always think it's important when creating creatures to just think about unique ways that they interact with other monsters. Like, can they buff other creatures on the battlefield? Do they interact in specific ways to opportunity attacks? Do they have, unique bonus actions? Just things that differentiate them from another creature's stat block of the same, challenge rating.
I think you kind of like everybody kind of like going into any sort of combat encounter, there always is a case of like, is there someone in like a wizard hat, or can I see the healer? And it's like, well, there you go, and that instantly changes the dynamic of the fight, because now there's there is a target, or like a focus to kind of go towards. And actually, was it while you were chatting, I did have like a thought, because talking about vulnerabilities, there is the froghemoth, which has a lightning susceptibility feature. Where it essentially is a vulnerability, but they've made it a feature where if it gets hit by lightning, it does some weird stuff, which is a very cool way to do it and stuff like that. So it's a case of like there is like almost like a precedent for these kind of stuff existing. But no, you make a really good point, and I'm off the school of there's always those narrative moments where you're towards the end of an encounter. This player is like, a player runs up, they do this like really kind of RP like heavy moment and stuff like that. It's like, this is the person who killed their parents, and they reduce the enemy down to like 1 HP. And it's like, mechanically, you're like, they still have 1 HP, but as a DM, as your like their friends, you should be like, and you kill them.
And you obliterate them off the face of the planet.
You did more than enough damage. It definitely weren't going to be around and then stab you afterwards, because that would be anticlimactic and not fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've even held on to bosses before when NPCs are involved in a fight. Like, this NPC Dagger Strike definitely should have killed him, but he's still hanging on there because a PC's turn is coming up and they really want that. How do you want to do that?
So then I guess, so over the 160 plus days of making monsters then, is there anything that you've kind of picked up, or like any sort of like tips or guidance that you can like you've learned over, again, 160 times? That's a lot. That's
okay, so any tips? Double check your math before you put anything. Just save yourself the headache from hosting a stat block and someone pointing out to you that that an 18 is not a +5 modifier, that's a +4. And you're like, I mean, yeah, that's a typo, but okay.
Yeah, it's like,
Thanks.
oh, someone's engaged with my free thing that I'm handing out for free. Oh, okay, they're complaining. Okay,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. So I do just always recommend checking the math though, just because, just in case something is wrong. I have caught numerous errors after I've posted things, which are not always embarrassing, but just can get taken the wrong way too. Like I've once had, I once left a stat block up that had like 4d8 damage when it was supposed to be 1d8 damage because I forgot to change the numbers. So, just double checking your math, just making sure everything lines up really helps, because people can read something and then become very confused if the numbers don't line up. And while that's not too hard, the easier a stat block is to parse for the person reading it, the easier it is for them to implement. I get into really, really quibbly stuff, but let's not get into really, really quibbly stuff.
I mean, if anything, this is a show to get into the really, really sort of quibbly stuff. So, I mean, but if it's there, by all means, preach.
Okay. Well, so just in order of things that I noticed that get get put down wrong in stat blocks that I look over or that people will send to me for editing. Your skills are always in alphabetical order. So if a creature has perception, performance, and persuasion, they will go in that order. And insight will be before them.
I had to double check. It's like, wait a minute, PPP. No, it makes.
Same thing for any damage types that are included in vulnerabilities, resistances, immunities, and the condition immunities. Those things will all be in alphabetical order. In fact, most things will be in alphabetical order. That includes senses besides passive perception, languages, and feature traits.
Isn't damage resistance a little bit weird though, because it's damage types, then it's weapon damage types afterwards?
Yes, that's the weird thing. It's separated by a colon, so you'll do your magical damage types in alphabetical order, and then your bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, or bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks, which those are also in alphabetical order.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it also makes sense. I mean, it's kind of like, it kind of mimics the way your player handbook is. Well, the character sheet is laid out aside from the alphabetical features and stuff like that.
Yeah. The actions section is where that gets a little funkier. They're sometimes alphabetical, they're sometimes not, but you start with multi-attack, then you have like your different damaging abilities, then you have the non-multi-attack, like the non-weapon attacks, and then it just gets weird from there.
I don't know if this is a rule of thumb, but it does seem to be always like their main attack, typically melee ranged spells, unless then mainly a spellcaster first, at which point then it's like, yeah.
Then it's spellcasting, and then it's a headache.
No, I must admit, any creature, like I the few times that I've done it, because like in adventures you typically make stat blocks for NPCs and sort of thing, and 9 times out of 10 they have some form of spell casting, and that's always like, it's like, oh great, okay, I've just made layout hell for myself.
Yeah. I don't do this all the time myself, so do as I say, not as I do. It's usually helpful for any spell class, like any character or any stat block that represents a spellcaster, to have at least one of their like cantrips or spells included as an action, just for ease of, someone not wanting to parse an entire spell list to figure out what this character can do if they're just like, this person's just in a fight and they're gonna die next turn.
Yeah, that's. I think it feels like sometimes a bit of a monster making trap, to be like, okay, I want to make this low CR monster. Oh, I want them to be like a healer. Oh, okay, I should give them healing spells. And it's like, you could give them healing actions or features, and just kind of a cheeky way around it without because then they have to look at the stat, and then if they don't know the spell, then they have to it's
because then you have to make the spell list. You have to make your spell list. Depending on if it's innate spellcasting or regular spellcasting, and you have to make the spellcasting trait make sense, and then innate spellcasting has a whole bunch of different rules, and just make it an action.
I mean, simplicity. I must admit, just kind of hearing you know your stuff about like without question. It's like I now know if I have any monster related question, I think this is you like.
Oh, and hit dice is based on creature size, is the other thing. Gargantuan creatures have d20s, huge is d12s, large is d10s, mediums d8s, small d6, and tiny d4.
Yes.
I see that mistake made a lot too.
Yeah, no, I think the one that sometimes gets me is obviously the it's always a combination of like, okay, well, they have like sometimes it's hard to decide how many, like, say to take a gargantuan monster, it's like obviously their health is like d20s, but it's like how many d20s do I want to give them? And then for each d20 I give them, I have to wait. Oh, I've given them an awkward like constitution modifier, so it doesn't add easily. I've got to do, what is it? I'm giving them 7s. That's 7 times 4. It's like the math adds up.
Ugh. I love the numbers, but it can get really clunky sometimes, especially. You always have to sometimes it's just gut feeling. Sometimes it's just this monster has this amount of HP. I tend to sometimes look to see like the highest, like what do the more tanky creatures have in this CR range and what do the casters have in the CR range, and just kind of like on a range from armored turtle to bard
Upside down turtle.
the upside down turtle, how much HP do I expect this to have, and pick accordingly. Again, it's a scattershot thing. If a DM puts one of these creatures into a combat and they're like, I need this to survive like 2 more rounds, then it's definitely going to, because of my average party damage, they'll like triple the HP.
It's more of an art than a science.
Definitely more of an art than a science. I feel like the actual science comes into your like mechanical design, and then the art is, what are the numbers?
Which is weird.
Backwards, really.
Yeah, like the art is the numbers. So I'm going to ask like a 2-pronged question then. It's like, okay, so when it comes to monsters in particular, what is your favorite part of designing one? And then what is your least favorite?
Okay. Favorite part is definitely figuring out like what is the gimmick? Like what is the thing that drives this creature's design? So for like that pirate captain I mentioned, it was legendary reactions. I wrote I've suddenly forgotten every monster I've ever written.
Again, you've written 163, so I'm not like.
There was I believe a flying like lightning, like storm-based creature, where
Nice.
The idea was that like if you struck it, it would deal, it would like electrify you and make your movement speed reduced. And then if you were a spellcaster, it would be difficult to concentrate because it could scream really loudly.
Nice.
And I'm like, how do I translate these into abilities? So that's my favorite part. My favorite part is coming up with a weird concept, like I want a creature based off of reactions, or I want to make myself cry because I play concentration casters.
I guess
Actually, I write a lot of creatures that heck over me specifically.
Yeah, no, it's I if it's a case of like you write what you know. In this case, but
in this case,
comes back to an earlier point of like, yeah, the it makes sense that the combination of like, okay, I have this really cool idea for like this concept for a creature. It's a ludonarrative harmony. You know, you want to bring it all together.
It's like I want this creature to act the specific way, and it helps for it helps with being specific sometimes if I really know what I'm aiming for. Because if I really know what I'm aiming for, then I don't need like an image, really, because you'll read the stat block and you'll be like, oh, I know what this is supposed to be. And your interpretation of it might look different than mine, but if you understand that this like lightning monster is supposed to be like a bird something, then we are on the same page. And it doesn't matter what you think it looks like, because I often don't use the description or the pictures in the monster manual anyway.
I mean, hey, it's another thing of like, it goes back to like, you just allow people to reskin it. It's like, it looks like whatever. It looks like a goblin.
It looks like whatever. So those are my favorite parts. It's just coming up with a cool concept and then making the stuff to back it up. My least favorite part is the squibbly scattershot numbers. Yeah. And that's really because while I love math, D&D and especially 5e, it sounds like has that problem where there's no good way to determine how the numbers are supposed to reflect like difficulty, because it's all over the place. The CR table for difficulty basically makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not the easiest tool, and yeah, no, there's 101 ways of like going about it. You can look at like, was it like average damage per level based on class, and it's like, okay, well, but then that doesn't really give you like a full idea of like what's yeah, it's so nebulous. It's like
what's the average party level? What's the average party damage? What if they have, magic items? What if they're min-maxers? What if they're not min-maxers?
Yeah. You can't win. I think like the moment you try going down that route of like, okay, well, I need to make this balanced, and then it's like there's going to be fringe cases. It's like, yeah.
According to an encounter builder, I run a game with 4 PCs, and they're allowed to take home game rule we have is you can carry around as many NPCs as you want, but only 2 of them can come into combat at a time. We call it the BioWare selection screen.
That's the
best thing we've ever done.
I mean, that is a very fair rule for like, I know there are numerous parties that I've been involved in who are essentially become like a roaming carnival with how many NPCs.
So it's like you can bring 2 in with you. So every encounter is balanced, or supposed to be, for 4 PCs and 2 NPCs.
Yeah.
And so I tried to make a fight. It said it was like hard deadly in the encounter builder for 6 level 5 PCs. And then our paladin one-shots the hardest monster on the board.
Yeah.
And at that point you're just like, nothing makes sense anymore.
I always like it's hard to hide like that moment as a DM to be like, oh no, you've just killed the strongest monster in one hit. Then you bust out the classic, and then emerges another one of like it's a tiered thing. They come one at a time.
They're taking that ye old strategy to heart. The one at a time.
Yeah, it's honorable. It's it's in their culture.
Yeah, definitely. I tried to get away with having one of the other creatures run away to go get reinforcements, and then the Protector Aasimar just sniped them from across the forest. So I mean that didn't work either. So they're just too smart for me.
You can't win. I suppose it's a case of like, okay, well now we need double deadly, I guess.
we need a tier of difficulty above deadly now.
Deadlier.
Deadliest.
Deadliester? I don't know. I just really think of like Ned Flanders.
Yeah. Next tier, Deathlanders.
So then I guess I guess to pull back just a little bit away from monsters. Again, thank you so much. This is like the most in-depth monster chat I think I've ever had, which has been delightful.
Yeah.
Has there been any sort of particular design choice that you've made that you're kind of like particularly proud of?
This is a hard one. I think one of my favorite things, and your mileage might vary on, and anyone else's might vary. I enjoy trying to sort of video game boss fights a little bit. When Sadie and I were writing DSOC, one of the things I really wanted to do with the final fight, which is against a giant undead Leviathan on an airship, it's pretty cool, everyone watching. And the idea was sort of just to figure out ways that you could make this seem like, a raid boss fight in a video game. Like, larger than life creature, it's trying to attack the ship you're on. You have a crew of NPCs that can repair the ship. There's the possibility of ads you have to deal with. It can lash its tail around the ship and like make it difficult terrain to get around it. It can make areas of the deck, full of poison. We added additional mechanics where you can kill each of the body parts of the Leviathan separate from its like main body, and so you can basically turn off its abilities. You can say, like, if you deal enough damage to one of the wings, that wing falls off and it doesn't have access to those abilities anymore. So you can make the fight easier for yourself, or you can prioritize the stuff that you don't want to deal with anymore. Like, do you want to stop smashing the deck with its tail? Yeah. Cut off the tail.
It's kind of treating the monster as like 5 different stat blocks. And it's such a cool idea. And to kind of touch onto that is like what makes certain encounters really engaging is the sort of thing of like having like timed elements, having like non-combat elements, having other things to do other than I run up and hit the thing. And it sounds like you kind of ticked all those boxes.
I love doing that. The adventure I wrote for Eyes Unclouded, Into the Heart of the Thicket, In the Heart of the Thicket, one of those two. I've forgotten the name of my own adventure. I'm good at this.
It's in the thicket somewhere.
Somewhere in the thicket. The final boss is against a corrupted wolf goddess, and she has legendary actions that are actually tied to the available ads. Like she's accompanied by 3 different ads, and each time you kill one of those ads, she no longer has access to one of her legendary actions. So basically, you make the fight easier by killing off the ads so that she doesn't deal quite as much damage to you anymore.
I get it. It's kind of awesome hearing you kind of use essentially MMO like terminology and stuff like that, because it's like that's kind of how you can see how that sort of design kind of influenced. No, it's awesome. Yeah, it's such a cool idea. Like it's going into a fight and just being like, okay, well, again, we can't just run in and send our paladin in to one hit the thing. We have to.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing. I was in my personal campaign, the one where my paladin just one shot somebody. I have been testing like a rule set for defeat, like doing Shadow of the Colossus type boss fights. Ooh. Where you get up on top of the monster and you beat it, and there's like using mythic actions to replicate boss phases, which is one of the coolest things that I think has ever come out of a hardcover, is the idea of mythic actions for someone who loves monsters blocks.
It's such a shame that it was kind of like I'd say, but like tucked away in the like rather than like, because it feels like that should be in the Monster Manual 2.
Make a Monster Manual 2 and put mythic actions in there. Come on. Wizards. So I've been trying to test something like that. I don't know if it'll become a full-fledged supplement I try to put out at any time, but it's something fun that I've been trying to just work on in a home game for play testing. And my players have been really receptive to it. They're like, it's fun to strategize. It's fun to discover what the creatures can do and like make it a little bit less of just a hack and slash.
So actually, that's one thing I kind of want to talk about. So again, looking at your kind of like catalog on the DMsGuild, it is surprisingly monster light.
It is surprisingly monster light, isn't it? Admittedly, that is because while I was doing a lot of my design work, I was working the later half of not the later half, basically from the point at which we put out DSOC to about 6 months after that, I was unable to produce a lot of content because I was working a very mentally harmful job at the time. Yeah. So it didn't give me a lot of spell slots to work and create. I managed to put out my Eyes Unclouded adventure. That was about it. There was some stuff that happened in the later half of the year that also didn't help too terribly much. And I've been working on some other projects, like Those Who Wander, that like in the past few months. So I haven't had a lot of time to dedicate to personal projects alongside a new full-time job that's a lot better and I like it more, but it still takes up most of my time. I'm glad things are better now. But it's interesting. It's I suppose it is a case of I'm kind of, it's always at that similar place of like you kind of get in like the almost like commission side of things where it's just like, I'm involved in all these really cool projects. There's so much like I do this, I do that, and it's like, I haven't really done like a me thing in a little while. Yeah. So that's something I really want to actually get into now that we've sort of finished and wrapped up Those Who Wander. I'm excited to take a little bit of a break to recharge and then get back to like more personal stuff to see if like, maybe I can make something that has a little bit more monster in it. Sadie and I had actually started a little bit of a monster supplement book that got a little bit tucked under the wayside when we both got really busy with the commission side of things.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, but also like again, I'm not complaining as an adventure writer myself. We need more adventures out there. There's never too many adventures. So I did kind of jump ahead a little bit with like my line of questioning, but I did kind of want to kind of tuck in or refer back to if there's across everything you've kind of done, is there a particular lesson that you kind of wish you'd learned maybe a little bit sooner, or what knowledge would you pass on to the listeners?
Two things, I think. The first being references are your friend. Don't think that you can do it all on your own. I mean, try. And then realize that you probably need to go reference something else, whether that be official hardcovers for wording or other people's adventures for ideas, and just like, because a lot of people can agree that sometimes hardcover adventures aren't written the most clearly. So
the style also isn't the most consistent between hardcovers.
So it's good to look for other people's adventures and just other people's supplements who people have praised as being very clearly written and understandable. And that's just kind of the stuff to pick up on. Just like look for feedback, look for the works that people say, hey, I read this and I completely understood it. It was easy to run, it was easy to understand, and look to see what they do. Look how they word things, look how they organize information. I think that is just priceless to have the fact that a lot of people's stuff is affordable on DMsGuild. If not, pay what you want sometimes. Check out for sales if your budget is still tight. There's a lot of opportunities, and some creators would probably even be willing to like give you a copy of something if you're in a situation where you can't afford it. Like, we have a really, really nice community for stuff like that.
I know there's a good number of like community copy initiatives across but also, I mean, there's so much content. There's so much. There's so much.
It's like you kind of wish you could just consume it all, except there's not enough hours in the day.
It's every now and then there's a sale going on. You go, oh, I'll pick this up, and then you look at like your like drive-through RPG like library and like, oh, I've got one or two things.
I haven't read any of this other stuff. Yeah. Oops.
Like it happened eventually. Like I said, that it's the case of like you're up here with like all the things you want to read. So I'll read it soon. I promise. It's on my to-do list.
It's on there. The second lesson, I think, is definitely just the idea of burnout in general and creative burnout and time management. Something I thought that I would be invincible. I thought I would be invincible. Like, I could work a full-time job. I could do this creative stuff in the evening. I think it's fun. I studied for this. I was driven to want to make a career out of it. I can definitely do this alongside a full-time job. I couldn't. I learned that very fast, that I could not handle it the way that I wanted to. I could not take on as many projects as I hoped to, and I could not produce quality content like I wanted to. And then sort of hit a cycle where I eventually just reached burnout trying to sustain that. So I just highly recommend figuring out ways to let yourself take breaks, recharge, consume other content, get ideas. People have likened creators to sponges, and sometimes you can't keep wringing the empty sponge until you put more water in it.
I mean, that's another thing that I was like, is just because something is fun doesn't mean it isn't strenuous in some way, shape, or form. And that it's always that case of like, I'm doing something I love. Why can I not do this anymore? And it's like, well, yeah, because you've been twisted like 4 different ways.
Why am I so tired of looking at numbers? I love numbers.
What do they mean? I don't even know anymore.
Ooh, nothing has meaning. So
let's not go there.
That got a little too deep, didn't it?
No, it's fine. It's just at that point I've like when you use a keyboard button so much, like that button's a little bit faded. What does it mean anymore? That's just faded now. I've gone to that well too many times.
Yeah, that's my L key right now. Oof.
Oh, L, fair. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm trying to think of like what sort of paragraphs you've been writing that just like.
What happens when your entire keyboard is just filled with blank keys? What do you do at that point? Do you just?
I think at that point it's kind of like been kind of like osmosis into your your fingertips, so you don't need to say, you just know.
I don't need to guess. I know what this this is in my heart and my
There's
soul.
nothing worse. I've done it a few times where like you just like you're typing away like touch typing, and you're just like one key off either way, and you look back and it's like it's gibberish. I've just written gibberish.
Like I even do home row typing, and sometimes I'll catch myself not checking that, and I'll be like one key over, and I've just written utter nonsense.
Yeah, it's the worst because then you go back and go, oh no. Okay, so I've taken a quick glance at the time.
Oops.
And oops, I told you, like you just lose, you blink and it's gone.
You're
but
right.
I do again. I always feel like this is an important question to ask. But who are some of the people in the tabletop RPG community who particularly inspires you?
Don't make me pick. That's just rude, actually.
And that's why again, it used to be like who. But then I was like, I can't just make it one person. I'm like, who are some of the people you are open out a little bit?
Okay. So I think I'm obligated to plug my best friend Sadie because she is incredibly inspiring to me, and she's done amazing things. And this is the obvious plug that she's going to be upset that I put in here.
At this point, it's like you guys stepped into the hobby together and stuff like that. It's like it's obligated.
This one's for you, boo. But other people that I found really inspiring. Alyssa Vischer has been incredible. She was kind enough to give us access to her D&D Beyond content, which has been effectively a remarkable resource. It's been priceless. It saved my bacon I don't know how many times, just being able to search phrasing into D&D Beyond and pulling up almost all the content possible. So not only has she personally affected me and helped me, but she's also just a wealth of information for good insights into accessibility for new DMs and new players into the hobby, and ways to make sure that your writing is clear, your design is clear and understandable, and just focused on not being obtuse jargon.
Yeah.
So I am highly inspired by her and her threads. Other people, I really am enjoying following what's coming out of MCDM right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible. Arcadia is top notch.
Like I said, they haven't announced it, but I think there may be more than 3 editions.
I'm given the feedback and on it. I hope so. Yeah. There better be more.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I'll be mad if there's not. I'll just be mad. I'll be irrationally mad, but I will be mad.
Give us the content. Give us the magazine. Everyone wants it more. So that's been really inspiring, just to actually see getting to see more personalities, more design work on display in one very well designed environment is good. And just MCDM, Matt Colville's stuff on the action economy, on creature actions and everything has also been really good to look at and to read into.
I think Arcadia does a really good job of really putting the creators kind of in the forefront, which is really rare. I mean, it feels like Wizards of the Coast, there always feels to be a good level of obfuscation between who does kind of what, and again with Candlekeep they're kind of getting
they're
better.
Starting to tear that down a little bit, but they're still in the full hardcover adventures. You don't really know who wrote what chapters, and it's hard to engage with creators on that level.
Yeah, but again, it's more good thing Arcadia exists. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I'm the creator first content is so cool. It's well designed. It's tested. It's just good. It's just good stuff. It's beautiful.
It's good.
You love to see it.
Yeah, I feel like they should get that on the front cover. It's just good. It's just good. Matt and Amber in quotes.
In quotes.
It's just good. It's just good. Well, okay, no, fantastic. And then again, I'm afraid I do have to segue. We do have to end.
I could keep going. I have a longer list. There's more people.
No, again, my go-to joke is you did say a bunch of people, but I cut out their names. So if you feel like you should have been mentioned, you were. I'm cruel.
Yeah.
There you go. So
there's a whole bunch more people on here. I promise. If you've ever seen that one, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Is it the one like when you have the list and then it
Yes,
unfolds? Yeah,
yes.
yeah. We're on the same page.
We're on the same wavelength. Yes, that one. That's me with the names of like all of the people that I follow on Twitter.
Oh, thanks. So then I guess the final kind of closing question then is what are you currently working on? And then the connection to that is like, where can people kind of hear about your work?
Okay. Currently, I have been finishing up. I think if I mentioned earlier, I've been finishing up work on Those Who Wander,
Yeah.
which was that wildly successful 5e compatible game system that came out on Kickstarter a while back. And when it officially releases, if you didn't back the Kickstarter, you should definitely check it out when it's done. I don't know officially when that's coming out, but definitely keep an eye on it.
Going on Drive-Thru RPG, yes?
Yes, I believe it is. I believe it's going to go on Drive-Thru RPG when it launches. So keep an eye out for when that comes out. As for anything else aside from that, I am currently taking a well-earned break for burnout purposes.
We need refill that sponge.
Refill that sponge. I've got a couple of projects that were on the back burner. That creature one I mentioned earlier. There's a subclass compilation I was in the middle of working on, and possibly a future original TTRPG system, but by Sadie and I coming on the horizon. Not soon, but it's coming.
But like soon TM. It's like that.
Soon TM.
Wow. No, fantastic. Again, yeah, the Those Who Want It looks fantastic. All the kind of the art coming out of that as well. And yeah, congratulations on the successful Kickstarter. That stuff is always incredibly stressful.
Yeah, watching that was at first I was like, oh no, and then it just rocketed, and I'm just so grateful for all of the support that it got.
Speaking again, if you don't mind, speaking of Kickstarters, I have one or two things that I think I'm not contractually obligated to talk about, but I feel like I should.
Go.
I think at this point I should have 2, maybe 3 Kickstarters going through, which would be the Comets and Cockpits, which is like a 5e setting based in space. There is the re-release of the Cities Myth Atlantis, which is kind of being revamped for a second Kickstarter running. And there is What a Lovely Adventure, which I believe should be started by now. I hope so. If not, I've just lied. So I'm going to say less about that one because I'm just going to say, but that if you know what that is, there'll be a link for it in the description if it is out. If not, again, what could it mean? Who knows? Otherwise, Amber, thank you so much for taking some time to sit down and have this chit chat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
No, dude, it's been I someone who spends 3 days a week writing monsters blocks. You're gonna have a thing to say about monsters. So
too much to say. Too much, in fact.
Again, I think if I'm justified to bring anyone back for a second episode, it's probably gonna be you. I think.
I'll unfold the second volume of quibbling notes about.
You held back, I know you. But. I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. I've mentioned all my Kickstarter stuff. Again, I'm legally free. My final question then: how do you end a podcast?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm Amber, otherwise known as Sin. You could find me on Twitter at _synergy, where I do not post a lot that isn't stat blocks and occasionally contextless jokes about MMOs. It's a grab bag. It's 50% stat blocks, 25% nothing, 25% things you probably won't understand.
but hey, what was it? Come for the stat blocks, stay for everything else.
Exactly. Stay hydrated, stretch your wrists, and try to get some daylight, even if you don't go outside. Daylight is important. And drink water. I said that already.
Hey.
That's it.